Thank you so much. Well, can't beat that intro. Thank you so much for everyone to attend today. I want to say a special thank you for active members, veterans, and also the spouses supporting them today. So thanks for your service, everyone. Thanks for people to attend Power to Flag conversation. If you're wondering if DEIB principles even apply to a hierarchical organization like the military, the answer is yes. In fact, they strengthen the military's ability to be prepared, agile, and able to complete missions that keep us all safer. Please join Alleria Stanley, an active duty United States Service military, and she shares her experience as a woman and member of the LGBTQIA plus community within the military, how the military is increasingly turning towards DEIB principles, and how equity will play into the military of the future. Thanks so much for being here, Alleria. I'm so excited for this conversation, and thanks for your service. Alleria, do you want to just, do a quick intro about yourself in your own words before we start with any questions?
Sure, absolutely. And it's difficult to follow those two intros. I am hoping I even want to watch this now. So the very first thing, I am active duty. So with that, I must say that any views or opinions I express are my views alone and do not reflect the opinions, policies, or views of the United States government, the Department of Defense, or the United States Army. The other disclaimer I have is I'm recovering from a cold, so please bear with me. I hate drainage. But all of that said, good morning. It is a beautiful day, and it absolutely is. Out my window, it's crystal clear blue. If you don't have that, I wish you did. It's gorgeous here. What do we have with diversity in the military? And that sounds almost counterintuitive because the military is all about uniformity and conformity. It's right there in our uniforms that we all must look exactly alike and wear everything exactly alike. And if you have a military person in your family, then you know that that is true, where we measure things down to often the 1/8 of an inch on our uniforms to make it exactly right. So how do you want diversity? What does diversity bring to that? Well, diversity is a force multiplier because it brings different people, different experiences, different past, different ways of thinking into a structure where when you're wanting to think, how do you approach a problem? Because one of the large parts of being in the military is to adapt and overcome. You are faced with a challenge, and the battle space is always about challenges. Your opponent is always wanting to come up with a different way of doing things so that that's how they're going to get past. You don't want to do it like it was done before because they already know that, they studied that. So let's come up with something different. And then the other side has to adapt and overcome. So you need new ways of thinking, because if you do it the same way every time, then you will receive the past results, which is usually not a very good result. And in terms of the military, then you're talking about losses in not term of only just equipment, land, but also blood and treasure, which is tragically the worst part. So we're playing for keeps when we're talking in the military, which is why you want to have every possible asset available to you. And when you have diversity, when you have people from different backgrounds, when you bring in the Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, African Americans, the folks from the LGBTQIA plus community, women, all of these different backgrounds who have had different life experiences and different ways of approaching life, then you have an enormous force multiplier that if you're facing an opponent who is monolithic in their thinking, very universal and uniform in their structures, then you're going to overpower them every time. Military history is full of stories of where someone was innovative and came up with some different way of doing things. And that was the key to achieving success. Now, when I'm talking about in terms of achieving victory or your opponent, obviously the first impulse is to think in terms of battles, warfare, but we have this every day where we have a new struggle. We have, how are we going to do things? It might be, I want to come up with a different way of getting to work because traffic is overpowering, or raising my kids has just not been effective and I need to come up with a different way because I'm tired of butting my head against the wall. or any number of things. We face these challenges. And so every time that you want to come up with something new, a different way of approaching things, that's where diversity reigns.
I love what you said, and I think that is very right. I feel that every day there's so many battles, right? And if we all endure them together and we learn from one another, we could conquer a lot of things. So thanks for that. I really appreciate your insights. Can you tell us, a little bit of a deeper dive here about your own personal experience serving in the military as a woman and as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community? Anything that you can share with us about that transition and that journey for you?
Oh, it's been absolutely perfect and delightful, and there have been no issues whatsoever.
That's
No,
awesome.
I am also not just a woman, I'm a transgender woman. So I have, it's been an interesting ride. I also identify as lesbian in my orientation. So with almost 20 years now of being in the military, it's been quite a ride. I've been through the don't ask, don't tell era, where if you told about your orientation, which might include just having pictures of your family on your desk, or if there was a unit function, like bring your family, and then you showed up with yours, that could be the end of your career. And there are thousands of people who experience that, where they were discovered, somehow they were found out, and often through no fault of their own, and they lost their careers over it. So I came through during that time period. I also, being transgender, for a large part of my career, at least 2/3 of it, transgender was in the military regulations as a mental disorder that should be immediately discharged as being unfit for duty. So while serving, there was regulations that said I was unfit, mentally unfit. Now, obviously that's not true, but that was what the regulations said at the time. And again, if I was discovered, then I could immediately lose my career. There was a lot of fear that comes from that. I remember one point early in my career where I was applying for my top secret security clearance. And for those not familiar with security clearances, the higher the clearance, the deeper they dive into your life. And they dive deep. They find everyone that you've ever talked to. You may have forgotten about them, but they know, and they will find them. And so that for mine, they go back 10 years and they talk to everyone, everywhere I ever lived, everywhere I ever, put my head down for a night. And lo and behold, because no matter how well you think you're hiding something and putting it away, it leaks through. And so the last interview, of course, is one-on-one with me. And I'm sitting there with the investigator, and we go through all the usual questions. And finally, we get to the end after about 45 minutes. And the investigator says, "So what else are you not telling me?" And I'm like, "Well, what else do you want to know?" And like, "Well, there's probably something you need to tell me." I'm like, "I'd like to know what you want to talk about." And we do this dance for a while. And in my mind, it's sort of like, also, if you've ever been told, as a young child, wait till your parents get home, and you're like, "Oh," or the principal, you got to go to principal, anything else where or the boss wants to see you and you think, "Oh gosh, what did they find out?" Because we've all done things. We all have a list of things we've done. It's like, what did they find out about? And so I'm thinking, like, what is it that he wants me to tell? And I know what it is. Like, I really don't want to tell this. But I also need the security clearance. And we're just dancing around. Finally, I said, "Is it that I'm transgender?" There's this pause now that I've put it out there. And the investigator goes, "I was wondering if you're going to tell me that." And the investigator was looking at it like, would I reveal something? Was it blackmailable? Because obviously something that could have such adverse effects on me, I don't want to know. But by my coming open, now it didn't go any further than that. It was put into the file and deep into a file cabinet somewhere. It's in a dusty archive. And I got my security clearance. But that was an incredible amount of fear, where I'm like, okay, I have to make this decision. Now, in 2016, when on June 30th, when Secretary of Defense at the time, Ash Carter, opened up transgender service to all of us and we could openly serve, it was a momentous feeling. And to be able to come out and say, in uniform, to walk up to another person, say, I am transgender, it was incredible. Now, the ride continued, as we know. We changed administrations, and I got fired by tweet in 2017 in July, and then the ban went back into place on April 12th of 2019. And what that created was a very strong climate of the othering, where it's like, listen, we're getting rid of them as much as we can. They're unfit. They're not eligible to serve. They're horrible for the military, and all the other tweets and social media and everything that else came out. It created a climate in the military of permission, and where, like, yes, those of you who are allowed to stay, we have to tolerate you, but we know that you're actually not worthy and be rid of. That, as being allowed to openly serve, was incredibly powerful and empowering and amazing. The alternate of it was just as horrible, because the protections were removed. If someone made a snide comment, what could you say? Because you were no longer protected. You were no longer, this is wrong. And when you're, it's coming down from the top levels that you are not qualified, that you're not one of the people that we're looking for to serve, that's very powerful when that voice is coming from the very top. And it was a very difficult time. Then we changed administrations again, and another memo was issued, this time an executive order, and we were allowed to serve again. The difficulty is that it's this pendulum going back and forth, where you're allowed to serve, you're not allowed to serve, you're allowed to serve, not allowed to. And that's a very difficult thing to serve under, where you're not even sure if your eligibility, where your welcomeness is continuous, where it's distracting. How do you focus on your mission when you're not even sure if you're going to be able to continue to serve? Things like that. It's a detractor, and it takes away from that force of being able to focus on your mission, focus on your daily goals and tactics, whatever they may be, whether you may be, leading an elite force against the enemy somewhere, or you're making sure that the warehouse is properly stocked. Whatever it is, it's all part of the mission, and you need to be completely focused upon that, instead of wondering, like, well, I still have a job next year. So that's sort of been the path, and it's been extremely difficult. We're getting better. We're getting way better. And we're recognizing the inclusivity, because transgender persons, LGBT persons have been standing the watch all this time and contributing, and they're not contributing in minor ways. They're leading the way. The stories of persons in this community who identify this way, who are making everyday contributions, are enormous. But the best part of it is all the stories you never hear. By showing up to work every day and doing their jobs, they are fantastic, and they're showing their dedication, and that, yes, they can serve and they can contribute, and they are valuable members of the community and of the armed forces.
I'm taken aback at what you said, and I think that no one should question your humanity. No one should question who you are, because you have served our country, and you have made sure that people like me are free at home. So it must have been really difficult to feel that all of those things that you did just were questioned by someone that was at the top, that was your commander-in-chief. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I think that I'm so glad that things are getting better. I'm glad that changes are in place, and I'm glad that we're trying to move forward, and we really are educating ourselves with this important, part of the community. And you're right, like cannot have any distractions when you're mission focused. And this is this is the mission, right? Making sure that everyone is free at home. And so I really appreciate your powerful and honest, conversation about this. Let me ask you this question. What do you think that the LGBTQIA plus community is uniquely placed to guide organizational change?
Well, I talk about this often, how we look at folks who are, every day we're facing challenges, and especially transitions. And either you're joining the military, you're retiring from the military, as I am, in 111 days. And I'm reaching the end point, and I survived my career, 20 years. But you get married, you get divorced, your children are entering high school, you're entering college, leaving home, new jobs, all these transitions. If only there was a community of people who are familiar with transitioning and transitioning all at once. If only there was a community who knows what it's like to be in the minority, to be in the weak point in the conversation, to be on the adverse side of things, and to need to project their strength and to come forward and to stand strong. If only there were people who knew what that was like, what a contribution that would be to be able to tap into that resource. And so, and it's not just LGBTQIA plus, all minorities go through this, and be able to tap into these resources of folks who know how to face a transition, how to face adverse, how to face being opposed, actively opposed, whether it's being opposed in the workplace, being opposed to having a family, being opposed to exist in some cases, where you are an abomination and should not even exist. How do you face that? And what an incredible strength that those people have when you get up every day and you're like, I'm going to continue forward. To tap into that resource, to tap into that resilience that they bring is incredible. And so it's a community that has so much to offer by tapping into it, instead of being othered and set aside, like, oh, we don't want, oh, absolutely, we should definitely talk. How do you handle this? How would you face this challenge? And how you face that challenge, how can I take that and apply that into my life when I have a challenge? And we all have challenges where we have to face these things. They don't have to be these momentous, big, societal challenges, because sometimes just getting up in the morning, how do you do it? How do you get up in the day and go, it's Monday, I don't want to do this. How do you do that? And how do you, maybe you have a job that you can't stand and you don't know how to change your life. You don't want to go to that workplace anymore. You don't like your boss. You don't like the workplace. You don't like your job. You don't like the pay, whatever it is you don't like. And he was like, I want to change and I don't know how. How do you talk to people who know how to change the fundamentals of their lives and to face that, and the courage and the fear that comes, like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? I'm about to completely upend my life. Let's tap into that resource. These folks have so much to offer if only we talk to them.
And they do. They really do. I think that you speak a lot about resilience, and if I have seen one thing about the community that I've been exposed to when it comes to LGBTQIA plus is being resilience, kindness, love, cross allyship, and those things are so important in order to empower one another and better one another and elevate one another. So that's definitely so true, and I really thank you for saying that. Let's talk about DEIB itself. What is the role of DEIB principles and equity in particular within a hierarchical organization like the military? There has been great things. I'm so for it. I think it's time, but there has been controversy, right? There's podcasts I've heard. Joe Rogan was speaking about it recently about the controversy about it, both sides, and there has been people speaking in other communities about it as well. I think I want to hear from you. Like, what are your views to those that are questioning it and those that are for it? Like, what do you have to say about this topic that has somehow become so polarizing?
And isn't it sad that
It's sad.
including each other is polarizing? And but it's important. One of the important things about being in the military and when you have an opponent is to research and understand your opponent, because if you fully understand them better, then you have a better chance of overcoming and ultimately defeating your opponent. So it's easy to go, oh, they're foolish, they're wrong, they're idiots, like, oh. But it's important to take a look and see where are they coming from? These thoughts that are expressed are not new. We've been through this before with the military, where the military is not a social experiment. The military should not be changed. The military should, we should go with what's worked because that's what's strong, and why change things now? Those were all arguments heard when President Truman integrated the military back in 1948. Those were arguments that were all heard when women were allowed to join the military without a separate service, like the WASP or the WAX for them. They were allowed to actually join the military itself in the 1970s. It wasn't until the 1970s when the military opened itself to women's full service. But even then, it was still restricted. Military women could not serve in combat. And so again, when it was discussed to let women serve in combat roles, oh, well, we've heard that again. When it was to open up to the LGBT community, no T, LGBT community, again, this should not have societal change. We're not an experiment. And then with transgender persons and on, where this is brought up as the military should not be societal change, when that is the exact opposite of what the military is. The military has always been the forefront of change, innovation. We lead from the front. We don't stay complacent. If you stay complacent and you always stay where you are and without change, the military is full of examples that Google Maginot Line. It was an amazing defensive structure that was designed to keep the Germans at bay from France, and it was incredible. And the Germans went around it and completed, and it was an amazing victory for the Germans defeating the French, because they just went around the wall. And you have to be innovative, and that's what the Germans did. They looked at the walls like, well, we can't go over it, can't go under it, we'll go around it. And it's like, there's a forest of trees, you can't possibly go. So they went through the trees. Military is always about change. And so these arguments that we hear time and time again and it's the same arguments that you hear with each group. We shouldn't be the change. We should not change. The military is not where you want to have social experimentation. Absolutely, it's where you want to not only have experimentation to find out what's new, what works, and to tap into that, because that's how you do it. That's why we have ARPA. That's why we have all these labs. That's why we have creative ways to come up with things. And we have new airplanes, new rockets, new ships, new tanks, new weapons, because if we weren't, we'd still be using bows and arrows. And gosh, that doesn't work too well on today's battle space. Let's use something different. And you want to have as much as possible. You want to tap into that as much as possible. So yes, be innovative, come up with something new, and don't be afraid of it, because the military is not afraid. We face our fears. We face them head on, and we challenge them, and we say, it is scary. It is going to be different to have people who look differently in the ranks, or who believe differently or think differently in the ranks. And you know what? I'm not afraid. I'm going to face that challenge, and I'm going to welcome it, and we're going to be stronger for it.
I really love what you said, because if we think about it strategically, right, and tactically, DEIB could be said that it's a part of a mental tactic toolkit to defeat opponents. And we could also say that because of the change in innovation, we went from having actual wars that were done in trenches, and I mean, it's still kind of going, but drones, cybersecurity, it's part of the way that we that we handle war. So much innovation. And you're right. I mean, it's about adjusting to the times and fortifying the force. We're all human beings that want to be able to defend our country, and we should be able to do it. And isn't it crazy that the 70s were not that long ago? It's just boggles my mind up to this day. Speaking of what you've been saying, and I want to wrap it up here because we're approaching the last 2 minutes. What would a future more equitable military look like in your opinion?
It would look like, well, it would look like when you get onto an airplane and everyone looks different, or you go through an airport, or you walk through a Walmart, for example, or anywhere, and you have this incredible tapestry and mosaic and a picture instead of just a bland, universal, monolithic look. It'll be incredibly creative, and not only that, it will eventually be without labels because we won't care. There won't be a need to say, oh, I am this, I'm that. It's like, I am a soldier, I am an airman, I'm a sailor, I'm a Marine, I'm a guardian, I'm a Coast Guardsman. Whatever it is that you are, that is your core identity. And what you bring to it is just that wealth. So that is ultimately, and we're getting there, where we welcome, doesn't matter how you look or what you could do, we welcome that because it is our enduring strength.
It is. And great words, great conversation to, absorb from today. Alleria, I really thank you. And, I really hope that you enjoyed talking with us as much as I enjoyed absorbing from you. And we all did learning from you. So thanks
This
so
has been
much.
delightful. Thank you so much.